Hey guys, Sublord here, back in with another action figure video. Not a review, because today we'll finally be taking a look at my top 13 favorite action figures of 2023. For those of you wondering, why top 13? Reason 1, because I'm a bad mofo. So bad I'm posting this video towards the tail end of 2024. Reason 2, I don't think 10 is quite enough to show just how good a year for action figures 2023 was. So, we'll be rolling with 13. But before we get into the meat and taters of this video, some ground rules that are pretty self-explanatory. Rule number 1, it had to come out in 2023. Rule number 2, I have to have it. Rule number 3, have to have already reviewed it. And rule number 4, no repeats. So while I may have one Mythic Legions figure on this list, I will not have 2. Same thing goes for Marvel Legends. While I may have 1 on this list, I will not have 2. So with that being said, why don't we kick things off with the number 13 spot. First up is the Transformers Legacy Evolution Voyager Class Bludgeon from Hasbro. And before you say I can't believe it's not Beast Wars or Bayformers, look, good old Bludgeon here is one of your boys' top 3 favorite Decepticons, along with that purple Cyclops with the gun arm Shockwave and that blue Boombox Soundwave. So cut your boy a little bit of slack for not picking something with fur on it or a bunch of sharp pointy edges on it, because this figure is freaking awesome. On top of the fact that the engineering is top notch, the articulation is rivaling that of Marvel Legends, another Hasbro brand, and that is unheard of in this day and age. That said, honorable mention goes to Tarn, the original figure that utilized this body mold that I wasn't able to get a hold of the first time around, but will definitely try and get my hands on when the reissue comes out. Next up is Blade, from the Marvel Legends Mindless One Build-A-Figure Wave from Hasbro. And look, I know a lot of people out there were dogging on my boy Blade here, but to their credit, I think Hasbro did a pretty good job on this guy. Came with a lot of accessories, and not for nothing, this is a character we have needed back in the Marvel Legends line for the longest time, it seems. Not to mention that since he made my list, he's obviously a character that I've wanted back in the Marvel Legends line for the longest time, it seems. Especially in this particular costume, because it goes best with my Midnight Suns setup, which is a team I'd like to complete someday if we ever get that gosh darn wealth by night, that is. Next up is the new Eternia Webstore figure from the Masterverse line from Mattel, and look, when it comes to Masters of the Universe, Scareglow, Webstore, Clawful, and Merman are my big 4. Don't ask me why. It is what it is. That said, Mattel did an amazing job with this version of Webstore here, because for the price point of $20 to $25, you have many, and I mean many, different display options and configurations you can put this guy into. You can display him as the 2000X look, like I've done here. You can display him as the classic look, or a more new school look. Ultimately, the choice is yours. That said, I'd like to give a shout out to my boy Clawful, who, if it weren't for the deluxe price point, may have even tied with good old Webstore here, but fingers crossed we see Scareglow and possibly even Scaremare join this new Eternia subline sometime in the future. Next up is the mighty Monger from the Thundercats Ultimates line by Super 7. Because you can't go wrong with the Rankin Bass version of Satan now, can you? That said, good old Monger here almost didn't make the cut to be a part of this video, because he came in towards the tail end of 2023. December 29th to be exact. But since he managed to come in at the very last minute, he qualifies to land a spot on my list. And boy, am I glad that he did, because he is freaking fantastic. However, there is another figure that almost didn't fit the criteria to be a part of this video because you guys haven't seen the review of him yet. We are going to discuss that right now. Next up is the Bela Lugosi's Count Dracula figure, blah blah blah, from the Universal Monsters Ultimates line of NECA Toys. And this is the one figure I mentioned earlier that made it onto my list that you guys haven't seen the review of yet. However, if you paid attention to my rule earlier, I said that I had to have already recorded the review and posted it to YouTube. Never said it had to be public now, did I? Ah, very sneaky, just like the Count here. But what else can I say about the NECA Toys Universal Monsters Ultimates line that hasn't already been said, other than if you're a fan of the Universal Monsters property like yours truly, then these figures are by far the best quality, the best value, and the best price, because for the price point you get a lot, and I mean a lot, of accessories with these figures. That said, if I'm being honest, while he falls a bit short in that department, the creature from the Black Lagoon was giving good old Count Dracula here a run for his money. But it's ultimately the Prince of Darkness that swooped in and landed a spot on my list. Next up is the DC Multiverse Spawn figure from the Batman vs. Spawn 2-pack from McFarlane Toys. Now, I know what some of you out there are probably thinking. That's not a DC Multiverse figure, that's a Spawn Universe figure. Well, all I gotta say to that is, he comes in a DC Multiverse box, god dang it, and while good old Al Simmons here may not be an original DC Comics character, he's at least packaged with an original DC Comics character, so cut him some slack, will ya? Because in my opinion, this is by far one of, if not the best, Spawn figure we've ever gotten, at least in a long time, especially if you're looking for this particular look of the character. That would be the more modern version of Spawn with the big chunky gauntlet and the big old honkin' boot. However, McFarlane Toys literally put lipstick on a pig in this instance by packaging this amazing Spawn figure with by far one of the worst Batman figures I've ever looked at on this channel, because if I'm being 100% honest with you, that Batman was the hottest of hot garbage, but thankfully didn't hold back good old Al Simmons enough from landing a spot on my list. Next up is Vorgus Vermilius, the Blood Armor, version 2 from the Mythic Legions line by Four Horsemen Studios. Now, I was originally toying around with the idea of either putting this guy or Gorgo Aetherblade version 2 on my list, but it was ultimately the Blood Armor that took the spot, because the original Vorgus Vermilius version 1 was one of the first Mythic Legions figures I ever got from the fine folks over at Four Horsemen Studios, and man, all I gotta say is, for a figure that in my opinion did not need an upgrade, what an upgrade this version 2 received. The Four Horsemen knocked this one out of the park. Between the armor used, the color of the armor used, that awesome Spawn-like soft goods cape, the new weapons they threw in there, and if you're like me and got the Legions Con exclusive, you got that translucent red screaming vampire head, just to set everything off. And if you are curious about good old Vorgus Vermilius here, he is still available on Store Horseman, so you got no excuse not to grab one and check him out for yourself. Next up is the man, the myth, the legend, known as Warduke, from the Dungeons & Dragons Ultimates line by NECA Toys. And look, what do I even need to say about this figure that almost every other YouTuber that did a top 10, top 13, top whatever list of 2023 hasn't already said? This figure, while it was quite a while before we got our hands on it, was well worth the wait. The sculpt, the paint, the accessories, albeit a little bit short on the hands, especially compared to his quote-unquote wavemate Grimsword, but man, NECA Toys knocked this guy out of the park. The only thing I worry about is the longevity of the wings on his helmet. Those feel a little fragile, and that's not Italian either. Next up is the King Spawn from the Spawn's Universe line from McFarlane Toys, and unlike the previous Spawn figure on my list, this guy is not held back by a crappy Batman figure whatsoever. In fact, I think for the $50 price point, you're definitely getting what you're paying for here. For starters, you get this awesome Spawn figure, which, might I add, would be the perfect base for a Wings of Redemption Spawn custom. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Then you get what is essentially a gun pack, or at least most of a gun pack. 7 guns in total. That's pretty much a gun pack to me. Then on top of all of that, you get 3 really cool demon minions. And no, I don't mean those stupid little yellow guys with the blue overalls either. That said, I'm a little concerned about the future of the Spawn's universe line since things have been relatively quiet this past year, but here's hoping we'll see something new from it soon. Next up is the Mosque of the Red Death from the Figura Obscura line by Four Horsemen Studios. And this one is a bit of a head-scratcher for me because a lot of people were sucking off the Monkey King as far as being the best Figura Obscura release of 2023. And while I got no problems with good old Sun Wukong, think he's an awesome figure, if it weren't for Red Death here, I'd probably go with something like Jacob Marley. Mostly because A Christmas Carol is a property that is near and dear to my heart, but I digress because Mosque of the Red Death here is where it's at for me, man, because not only do we get brand new tooling for the time, but that said tooling is more articulated than anything the Horsemen have ever given us before, and it is not hindered by his accoutrements like both Jacob Marley and the Monkey King. And even where it is, you can remove those parts to get even more range than you already got. And I gotta be honest with you, it's quite a bit. Top that off with the frightening reveal beneath the red mask and that awesome grandfather clock, and you have, in my opinion, the complete package. Next up is my Dambe Angela from the Gargoyles Ultimates line by NECA Toys. And I know what some of you out there are probably thinking right now, a female figure in your top 13 video? What is this blasphemy? Well, truth be told, I did put the Executive Replicas Lady Death figure in my top 13 video from 2021, so y'all can suck on that. However, good old Angela here is a character I've wanted in action figure form for the longest time, it seems, because shy of a couple of Funko Pops here and there, she hasn't had hardly any physical merchandise that I know of anyways. And that, my friends, is the true blasphemy in this situation, because if you're a fan of the Gargoyle series like yours truly, you know that Angela is an awesome character and deserves more credit than she has gotten over the past couple decades or so. So much so that I've contemplated on even putting Brooklyn in the trio from this line in her place, but I already had Brooklyn in the trio from the old Kenner days. I've never had an Angela figure before because there has never been an Angela figure before. And no, I'm not counting the Funko Pops as figures because those are their own demons entirely. I just hope the fine folks over at NECA Toys haven't forgotten about this Gargoyles Ultimates line because I like getting characters I don't already have. And I'm hoping we get more of those in the near to distant future. Next up is Dimistos from Four Horsemen Studios. And look, I know some of you out there are probably thinking that I'm cheating putting this guy on the list since we already had Morgus Vermilius on here, and one could argue Dimistos classifies as a Mythic Legions figure despite the fact he's not branded as such. However, I've stated many times in the past that I'm a full-fledged Four Horsemen cuck, and I'm totally okay with that, because this guy is freaking fantastic, because I absolutely love the armor, I love the weapons, I love the soft goods, and to top it all off, I freaking love the reuse of that Belphegor head sculpt and the more traditional bone color with those piercing green eyes that just set it all off, man. Because this figure in my opinion, has a presence that not a lot of figures have, if I'm being honest. And despite the fact that I did not get my hands on the PowerCon exclusive version of this guy, I don't think those translucent green parts make or break this figure whatsoever. I think he's freaking fantastic the way he is, and is still available on Store Horseman right now, so you got no excuse not to pick one up and check him out for yourself. And my number one favorite action figure of 2023 is going to be none other than the Mezco Toys 1/12 Collective Ghost Rider. Because for $250 and almost a 2-year wait, it better be, right? Jokes aside, despite the fact that this guy clocked in at a relatively high price point for most folks and took quite a while to get here, all I gotta say is, dang it all if it wasn't worth it, because the fine folks over at Mezco Toys did a great job on the Spirit of Vengeance here. Being a big Ghost Rider fan myself, there was no way I was passing up on this figure, because it is, in my opinion, one of the best Ghost Rider figures out there. Maybe not the best, but definitely one of the best. As a matter of fact, I treat this thing better than some people would treat the Holy Freaking Grail, because once this video is over, this thing will be going back in the box, so nothing bad happens to it. Am I crazy? Maybe, but last I checked, this was my channel, my rules. And speaking of the channel, this figure was also the first action figure review I did when I returned from my 7-month hiatus. So we started with him, we ended with him. So with that being said, time to wrap things up with some final thoughts. Overall, and there you have it, my top 13 action figures of 2023. Almost the end of 2024. That said, gotta be honest, it's been a pretty wild ride. So I gotta thank all you guys for sticking with me through 420 videos over the course of these past 366 days, because it is a leap year after all. Because if I'm being honest, I wouldn't be here without you guys, because while I'm not big on getting views, I don't mind it. I like a little attention too once in a while, but I gotta say, if you stuck with me for this long, that's a testament to your own insanity. Here I thought I was crazy for treating Ghost Rider like the Holy Grail, but with all that being said, I got a lot of fun stuff planned for spooky season, like a review of that Dracula over there, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you'll stay tuned for more, and until next time, I'll catch you guys later.